I've ever had.
You're welcome. It takes
I feel like we're the only.
What?
I said I feel like we're the only.
Pretty much. That doesn't change the fact that you guys are awesome. Okay. Somebody replaced my colors up here. Okay. Who read Revelation this week?
Not Devin. I asked him already.
Not Devin? Killing me, Smalls. Okay. How are we going to know what Revelation says if we don't read it?
Learn
not.
about it in class.
Yeah, that's what layabouts say. Okay, but for reals, if we try to study something the first time, we do not glean as much out of it. For reals, whenever we are studying it for the first time, talking about points, if we've already read it, we have that familiarity with it, and we pick stuff up out of it much easier because we're not trying to remember what the passage itself says, we're trying to glean what we get out of that passage instead of just remembering what it says. So, whenever we get to Revelation chapter 3, what is happening?
Still talking to the churches
Who?
in Asia.
Who?
Churches.
Nope. Who is talking?
Jesus.
Jesus. Jesus himself is talking. Who's he talking to? Directly.
The 7 churches of Asia.
Nope.
Oh, John.
John. All right, John. The message is to the 7 churches, but he's talking directly to John. And John is now relaying that message to the 7 churches and the rest of humanity for all time whenever he records what he saw. How was Jesus described in chapter 1?
Feet of bronze, long white.
All right, there's more than that. It wasn't just bronze, it was burnished bronze, right? That's special. That didn't have to be in there, but God put it in there, so we need to remember that. Burnished bronze. All right. Like bronze that was in a furnace, in a forge. Shiny, bright, pure, strong. How else?
Coming with a double-edged sword.
All right, he had a two-edged sword coming out of his mouth. What else?
A long white robe.
Right?
Golden sash.
White robe with the golden sash. We're going to hear about white robes in chapter 3 too.
Eyes of fire.
Eyes of fire. What else?
Oh, white hair.
Right, white hair. White hair indicating being ancient, right? Old age. People with long white hair are old. You don't see a 25-year-old with a long white hairdo. Unless they're weird and they faked it. But whenever we get to chapter 3, how many churches have we went through so far?
4.
That is the ugliest G I've ever written. How many churches does Jesus write to in Asia? 7, right? 7 total here. In my cool little chart, how many so far are doing pretty good? No rebuke. 1. Are we sure about that? Because that wasn't a real confident 1.
Yeah.
All right. 1, doing good. How many doing not so good? 3 so far. How bad's that ratio?
Pretty bad.
Very bad.
Not good, right? But whenever we look at God's people as a whole throughout the vast majority of their history, this is pretty typical of the ratio that you find. You find a lot of people that should be in a right relationship with God that aren't. And I don't want to be a doomsday foreteller or anything like that, but if you look at the church today, do you think that we are an exception to the rule in 2019, or whatever year it is now, 2019, we are any different than back in the mid-90s whenever John wrote this? You think something magically changed to make it where all the churches today are way more faithful than the churches were this close to miracles happening and Jesus being died? Some people could still remember Jesus from earlier in their life. No. No. So whenever we see this ratio of 1 congregation with no rebuke from Jesus and 3 with a serious rebuke, that's probably a pretty good indicator that today is about the same or even more so. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be the people that are unstained with sin. And we're going to look at some exceptions to those congregations that got rebukes here in a second. I tell you what, let's read the whole thing. We'll go back through and hit the highlights. To the angel of the church in Sardis write, the words of him who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works. You have the reputation of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up and strengthen what remains and is about to die, for I have not found your works complete in the sight of my God. Remember then what you received and heard, keep it and repent. If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come against you. Yet you have still a few names in Sardis, people who have not soiled their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. He took a breath. All right, we're starting in verse 5 of chapter 3. The one who conquers will be clothed thus in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth. I'm coming soon. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, in my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creation. I know your works, you are neither cold nor hot. Would that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spit you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I have need of nothing, not realizing you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may be rich, and white garments, so that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen, and salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see. To those whom I love, I reprove and discipline, so be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and eat with him and him with me. The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay, so we go back to the beginning. In verse 1, the angel of the church of Sardis, he says, I know your works. You have the reputation of being alive, but you are dead. I think this is an accurate description of a lot of churches in today's age. From the outside looking in, what do you see a lot of times?
Churches who, or rather denominations even, that look like they are worshiping God properly.
Let's throw denominations out the window for a second. You're right.
Yeah.
not wrong by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not writing to denominations here. He's writing to congregations of his church, the true church, not Baptist or Methodist or Lutherans, because they don't exist at this point. He's writing to his church, churches of Christ, churches of God. Whenever you look at congregations that should be doing what God says because they know what to do, they have the appearance of being of his church, what do you see? Just in a general sense, nothing crazy specific. Thinking in a broad sense.
I see compromise.
Okay? Compromise. Let's not get that detailed yet. Let's get even more broad. You're right. It's happening more and more and more, it seems. Just without looking at their doctrine and knowing what they're teaching in their Bible classes or what's being taught from their pulpit, if you just went on to a church's Facebook page today, what would you see from the outside looking in at that congregation?
Deceitfulness?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the vast majority of congregations are pretty straightforward on what they're doing.
It probably wouldn't look bad. I think it would look pretty good.
Why?
Because
What would they be doing?
they would just be like saying what they do and stuff, or what they at least claim they do.
Okay.
You
are really close. I'm just going to go ahead and give it to Devin because he's really in the ballpark. A lot of times, right? Just they're busy doing stuff. If you look at a lot of congregations that have compromised, like what Jacob was talking about, a lot of times they're very busy. They're active in the community. They're helping people in need. They have a lot of programs going to try to help out people that have counseling needs or people that have physical needs, homeless people in the community, picking up alongside the road, just youth programs. They have a lot of movement going on, a lot of activity. And that gives the appearance of what?
good.
Life. Right. Life in general. If you shoot a deer, if it is thrashing around on the ground and moving, what does that mean? But it's still alive, right? Whenever you go up to an animal that you have shot while you're hunting, if it has stopped moving for quite some time, if it stopped moving, that's an indication that it is dead.
Sometimes.
Most of the time. You go up and you poke it in the eye to make sure it's dead. But if it stopped moving, that's an indication of death. If you go in to a family member's bedroom and they're not moving, you don't even see their chest going up and down, what do you think?
They're dead.
They've died on me. They have died on me. Sometimes as a parent, whenever you go in to check on your kids while they're sleeping, they have no idea you're there, but sometimes you go in just to make sure that they're still breathing. And if they're still breathing, you're like, okay, I can go to bed in peace tonight. But every once in a while, they're doing the shallow breath thing where they're barely moving, and you have to go like put your hand on them to make sure their chest is actually going up and down. You do that when you have babies. You guys will figure that out down the road. But that movement gives you assurance that there's life. But it's deceiving in this instance. It's a false indication of life. Jesus says that you have the reputation of being alive. He even knows their works. There's works there. But you're dead. And that is something that a lot of people can get sucked into. Are you worried about your congregation's health? Oh no, look at all this stuff we're doing. Look at all these great programs we have. Look at all these people that are participating. That doesn't mean you're alive as a church. It means you're dead. Just giving the appearance of life. He says to wake up and strengthen what remains and is about to die. There's still a few people hanging on here. Look down in verse 4. Yet you have still a few names in Sardis, people who have not soiled their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. there's still a few people hanging on at this place where the vast majority of everybody is spiritually dead. They are hanging on for dear life and are still worthy of being called children of God. Look at what they will get to do. They will get to walk with me in white. What color of a robe was Jesus clothed in chapter 1? White. What is white associated with?
Pure.
Purity. Cleanliness, right? If you wear a white suit while you go out to a hog pen, what's going to happen?
It's gonna get dirty.
It's going to get filthy, right? You don't go feed cows in white pants. It shows dirt very easily, but these are clean, pure, washed white robes. Robes that have been washed white by the blood of Christ. Isaiah says, though our sins be as scarlet, he will make them as white as snow. There you go. All right. So those people that are hanging on are going to be clothed in white, the same way that Jesus is. The one who conquers will be thus clothed in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. That never is important. It gives us an assurance that our eternal salvation is secure. We don't have to worry about whether or not a mistake is made, whether Jesus is going to make a clerical error. One time someone was doing a background check on me, and the guy called me and he said, "Is there anything you didn't tell me?" "No, I pretty much told you my whole life story." He said, "So you've never been arrested?" "No, I've never been arrested." He's like, "You've never spent a night in Greene County?" "I've never been arrested and took to Greene County. Never even been to their jail." He's like, "All right, well, I'm showing you have an arrest down here in Greene County. Christian County said that you were arrested and transferred from Greene County to Christian County." That's not me. Christian County had taken my name off of a property damage report I had filed whenever some neighbor kids had busted up some of our stuff over at Chadwick, and put my birth date, my social security number, my address, everything, and merged me in with an Andrew House that had an arrest record in their system. They made a clerical error, and boy, was it kind of a doozy. It took me a couple hours at their office to sort out, which it was a pain in the neck. But that clerical error caused me a headache. There's no clerical errors in heaven. Jesus isn't going to mix up your name in the book of life and accidentally put you on the naughty list or blot your name out of the book of life. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen if you are secure and conquer in the end. We have that eternal assurance. Let's skip down to the church at Philadelphia. All right, the Sardis have issues. Not so good. Yes, we're up to 4 in the not so good category so far. To the church of the angel of Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one opens. Think back with me for a second. Picture one door that God shut and opened.
The ark.
Bingo. All right, the ark. Whenever the time of the ark happened, who shut that door whenever the flood started?
God.
God. Dan Winkler has a fantastic sermon about God shut the door. Whenever that door was shut on the ark, who could get it open?
No one.
Huh?
No one.
No one. No one could open it up except God. You're right. The people outside, do you think that somebody wanted to get that door open?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because their life depended on it. But God had shut it and he did not open it for them. Who opened it at the end? God opened the door of the ark at the appropriate time. The same way, the church is set up the same way. God has opened the door. He will not shut that door on anyone until the appropriate time. When is the door shut? The opportunity for us to enter the church shut. There's 2 times. Huh?
Oh, never mind.
There's 2 times.
When you die?
When you die is one. That one is subjective to every single person. The door is going to be shut to me if I'm not a Christian at a different time than it would for Anna if she was not a Christian. unless we die at the exact same split second, which is chances of that happening are pretty slim. When else?
You sin and refuse to repent.
Nope. I mean, the door is still open there if you decide to change your mind and come back to God up until the point of death.
When
If you're
Jesus
like,
comes back?
Hmm?
When Jesus comes back?
There you go. All right, at the resurrection. Whenever the resurrection comes back, who's going to be able to enter the church? Not one single solitary person. So Jesus is saying here that he has the door, or the ability to open the door. No one can shut it. Whenever he shuts it, no one can open it. He is the one that controls that access. And boy, are we happy that we have the ability to know how to access the church, how to get into the church. Look at what he says. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. How do we tend to measure people?
based on their works and actions.
All right, I would love to say that that's true, but that's not always the case. Real life,
Looks.
all right, looks is one.
How they treat other people.
I would love to say that's true too, but oftentimes that's not how we measure people either.
What do we hear about them?
Okay? Let's imagine that we all go to a party. We don't know each other, and we've just met each other. Hi, I'm Andrew. Hi, I'm Jacob. Good job, Jacob. Thanks for volunteering. What do you say right off the bat? What do you do for a living?
If you have things in common with them.
Most of the time, that's not how it goes with guys. Girls, it's a little bit different animal, probably. But with guys, whenever a guy meets another guy, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a lumberjack. Oh, well, I'm the director over a Fortune 500 company's department. Cool. Who do you think's worth more value? That guy, right? Mm-hmm. We tend to view people in the light of what they do, what they're worth, what kind of a person they are, ideally, but by the world standards, that's not how we get viewed. But look at Philadelphia. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. In terms of earthly power, of strength, of authority, of clout in their community, they don't have much of that. And that is a good description, excuse me, of a lot of congregations. A lot of times they're made up of poor people in communities where they don't have a lot of influence or clout. Sometimes they do, but in this case they did not. But that still did not keep them from keeping the faith. They did not deny Christ. They had a lot of trouble. They had people claiming to be Jews. And notice what Jesus calls them there. Those of the synagogue of Satan. What was a synagogue?
Place of worship.
For Jews. What had happened at this point? Roughly 25, 26 years before this was written. Jerusalem had been destroyed. The temple had been destroyed. 1 million+ Jews were killed in the war with the Romans as punishment by God for denying Christ and punishing his church, persecuting his church. So the people at this point, if you were a Jew at this point when this was written, what have you had to do?
Completely ignore God.
Completely ignore God and completely reject Christ in the process. So they were doing the exact opposite of what God wanted his children from Israel to do. He wanted them to come over into the church. They were the first fruits of the church. And then whenever they refused to come over at that point, they opened the door to the Gentiles in Acts chapter 11. So the Jews at this point are people that have completely rejected Christ. And they're doing the exact opposite of what God wants. They're persecuting the church. Look at what will happen since they have been faithful. To the one that conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Let me ask you a question. When does a pillar leave a temple?
Never.
Only when it's destroyed, and this is never going to be destroyed, right? It never is going to leave the presence of God. That should give us another sense of assurance that we are going to forevermore be in the presence of God if we conquer. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write on him the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, and which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. Whenever you get an important tool, if you have a tool in a workplace that is yours and people have sticky fingers, what do you do with it?
Put your name on it.
You put your name on it. If you have a company vehicle, usually if you have a fleet of vehicles, you put your mark on it. You put your name on it, you put your identification, the ID number, J66 or whatever, fleet vehicle on the license plates that lets you know it's part of their fleet, and they have their name on the side of it. Names show ownership. Names show ownership. If you go back to the old days and you had cows on the range, what did you do before plastic ear tags?
Random.
You branded them. You wanted your name marked on that cow to show that it was yours. And if anyone stole it, it did not belong to them because they did not own that brand. This is what God is showing. He's showing his ownership over you, his possession of you, the fact that he desires you and you're never going to leave his presence. All right, so the Church of Philadelphia. How am I doing on time? I don't have my watch.
10:07.
Oh, man, okay, we might make it. They're doing good or not so good?
Doing good.
Right, they're doing good. We got 2 in the doing good category. Now, Church at Laodicea. The Church of the Angel of Laodicea write the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creation. What does it mean, the beginning of God's creation? Look at it this way. Who are we talking about? Who's addressing the angel of the church at Laodicea?
Jesus.
Right, still Jesus. The words of the Amen. The faithful and true witness, who is?
Jesus.
Jesus still. The beginning of God's creation. Not what is that? Who is that? I was misleading earlier. Who is the beginning of God's creation? Jesus. How was creation created? You go back to Genesis chapter 1.
From dust.
No, before there was dust, there was darkness. But how did creation come into existence?
God.
Did what?
Spoke it.
Did what?
Spoke it.
Spoke. Right? He spoke. We know from other passages that Jesus is the specific figure of the Godhead that spoke creation into existence. Jesus himself is the beginning of God's creation. He's the source of everything that we see. So it's not that Jesus was created, because that's what some people try to twist this into. Jesus is saying, I am the beginning of God's creation. When do we see Jesus in Revelation referring to himself in a similar fashion? Chapter 1 and later in the book, since we're pinched on time. I am the Alpha
The Omega.
and the Omega, the beginning and the end. It's another way of referencing that he is the beginning of creation here. All right. I know your works, you're neither cold nor hot. This is probably the most familiar passage out of Revelation to people in the church. Would that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spit you out of my mouth. People like to say this is the only thing that will make Jesus sick, make him spew you or vomit you out of his mouth, is people being lukewarm. What is lukewarm?
In between cold and hot.
Yeah, it's like room temperature, right? Whenever you like to drink something, what do you like to drink at room temperature?
Water.
Water.
Yeah, you guys are weird. I like my water cold,
Yeah.
right? Whoever gets a Coca-Cola and says, you know what I want to do with this Coke? I want to leave it in the sun until it's about 85 degrees and then drink it.
I've done that before. It's disgusting.
That's
No,
more
you-
hot.
You like cold things to be cold and coffee and hot tea and stuff like that to be hot. Just lukewarm things are not that great. And
Coffee's
that's
okay lukewarm though.
huh?
I said coffee's okay lukewarm though.
No, I would
No.
disagree with you entirely.
No.
Coffee's meant to be cold or hot. But look at why Jesus says that. We always get caught up on them being lukewarm. But let's look on what that actually means. You say, I am rich, I have prospered, I have need of nothing. Let's pause right there for a second. Who does that sound like today?
We're talking about people in the church or outside of the church.
I don't know.
Atheists.
Okay. Let's throw atheist out the window for a second. I think you're right, but culture-wise.
Depends on their definition of riches and success.
Forget definitions for a second. Who has this mindset? Broad sense. You guys are probably being too specific.
President.
Huh?
President.
All right. Let's throw the president out. What is he president over?
Our country.
Our country. Our culture, right? Are we fat in America today?
Yeah.
All right. Not just whenever we step on a scale, though, right?
Found that since too.
I mean, obese.
What do we have that we don't need?
Lots.
Excess.
Oh, so much stuff, right? We are a culture of excess. You know what we did at the fall party over at Justin and Katie's house?
Mashed pumpkins.
Shot pumpkins.
We shot pumpkins, we batted pumpkins. You know what pumpkins are?
Food.
Food, right? I think we talked about that. Food. We were batting and throwing and slinging and smashing food all over the hillside.
It was fun.
It was fun. But when we have so much food that we were destroying it for fun. Every year people buy big giant round pumpkins and put them everywhere for decoration. That's food. If we get an order of chicken nuggets and french fries and our fries are soggy, what do we do with them?
Throw 'em away.
All right, we throw them out the window to feed the birds, or we feed it to the dog,
Complain
or
to
we
the
throw it in the
manager.
trash. We've already driven down the road at this point.
Okay, well.
We don't have time to go back. The line was long. But we have so much stuff that we are a nation of excess. Whenever I read, I am rich, I have prospered, I need nothing. If we could set covetousness aside for a second, that's us. That is our country and a lot of Western civilization in general. And a fair amount of Eastern civilizations too. We are at a prosperous time in this world. But we cannot say, I'm rich, I have prospered, and I have need of nothing, whenever, like these people, we are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. We think we have everything, but in reality, we have nothing. Nothing but shame and nakedness. That is what being lukewarm is. They were on fire for God. They became Christians. There's some persecution going on in the church. They just don't think they need anything at this point. And if we ever get to that point in our spiritual lives, we are in a world of hurt. I was talking about physical things, and we can get to that point, but this is really talking about spiritual things. It carries over from the physical side into the spiritual side a lot of times. Look at everything I have. God has blessed me. I don't really need that much. If we ever get to the point where we are not fully dependent on Christ, not fully dependent on His grace and His mercy and His blood, we are going to be in a world of hurt spiritually. If you think you have need of nothing, you're throwing God out the window, because we have need of that grace and that mercy and the blood of Christ from God. So we cannot be lukewarm Christians that think we're sitting okay and we don't need anything at all, because that breeds what?
Pride. Pride in oneself.
Pride and sin. Laziness. Breeds laziness. How many people worked hard to get to get to a point in their life where they are comfortable, and then lose that work ethic, that work drive that got them to that comfortable point in life? It can happen very, very easily. It doesn't happen at your stage of life yet for most people, but it can happen whenever you get older, you get comfortable, especially if they retire. They just get lazy. They sit around and they do nothing. They've lost that work drive to get them to that point. And we can do that spiritually. We can work and then not work as much and then be lazy. If you look around in congregations today, what you will find more than anything is apathy. People just don't care. They're lazy. They have no drive. Okay. Yeah, you guys want to do good stuff? Okay. We'll just go along with it. Oh, there's some compromise. We'll just go along with it, because you know what? We don't care. We cannot be those people. Look at what he says. He counsels them to buy gold refined by fire. Whenever you get gold out of the ground, does it look like the pure, beautiful Fort Knox bars of gold? What happens to it to get it to that stage of that beautiful, shiny, $1 million worth bar of gold?
They melt it together.
They what?
They melt it together.
They clean and polish.
How?
Put
How?
it in a mold.
Okay, they have to mold it. How do you get gold to go into that mold?
You melt it.
All right, you melt it down. You melt it down, and whenever it's melted down, what happens? No one here has ever cast lead bullets.
Pure.
Okay, you're right. Whenever you get metal hot at a certain temperature, the impurities, the non-desirable metals, and dirt and crud will rise up out of it and float on top like scum on water for an ugly...
Depending on how dense it is.
Yes. Whenever you are casting lead bullets, for instance, lead is very similar to gold. It's malleable, similar weight. Whenever you get lead hot, the dirt and crud and stuff and the impurities will rise up, and you skim it off the surface, and you're left with a beautiful, extremely hot, shimmery, silver-colored bowl of lead. And you can pour it into a mold, and it's refined. You do the same thing with gold in this case. They would heat it up, get the junk out of it, clean it up, and it would be pure. But it had to be refined by getting hot, refined by fire. Paul talks about refining their works by fire in 1 Corinthians. What is the fire in this case?
Jesus.
Not quite. You're on the right track. Go back to the setting of the book. What is the context of this letter being written? What's happening in the background here? What happened to Antipas back in chapter 2?
He was murdered.
He was murdered. Being murdered for something you believe is a form of
Persecution.
persecution. All right. The fire in this case, I believe, is persecution. If you really honestly believe something so strongly that you're willing to be persecuted for it, it's going to refine you. He counsels them also to clothe yourself in white garments so that your nakedness may not be seen. On the judgment day, there are going to be two types of clothing. those that are pure and white after they've been judged righteous by God, and those that are left shameful and uncovered for their wicked deeds to be exposed to everyone. Their filthy deeds out there for everyone to see. We don't want to be in that group. And salve to anoint your eyes so that you may see. A lot of people say that this city was famous for making an eye salve that was very beneficial for people's eyes. So he's making a reference there that they would understand that they have blinded themselves. They've blinded themselves thinking that they need nothing, that they were poor, that they were rich and in need of nothing. Look at what he says. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. If people rip that verse out of its context, what do they try to use it to do? What do they try to use it to support?
Is it once saved, always saved?
No, but you're right there in the same group of people. People will try to use this to support the sinner's prayer. They say, Jesus is standing there. All you have to do is open the door to your heart and he'll come right on in. But ask yourself real quick, who is this being addressed to? Besides Laodicea, what were they? Made up of? Christians. He was addressing Christians here. So this wasn't an alien sinner that Jesus was saying, just let me into your heart and I'll come on in and we'll have fellowship together. One more thing. Look at what he says in 21 and 22. The one who conquers, I will grant him to sit on my throne, sit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This is a beautiful picture of if you will overcome everything that you're going to face, if you will conquer the trials that you go through in your life and be a Christian faithfully until the end, you will get to sit with me on my throne. And that is a beautiful, beautiful picture that everyone should aspire to hope to be able to actually do someday. That is going to be worth everything in the world that we might face. If we have a serious spiritual look at ourselves instead of saying we have need of nothing, or that we're alive just because we're busy, like we talked about in Sardis, we will be far better off in actually being like the people in Philadelphia that were doing what they were supposed to do. They didn't have a lot of power or authority, but they were still faithful. That is the kind of group we need to try to be in. So, one more in the not so good, and we will talk about that a little bit more next week and jump into chapter 4.
Daniel might say something.